Have you ever felt a lie before you heard it? A cold dread that settles deep in your bones. A quiet alarm that tells you the world is about to shift beneath your feet. I felt it that Tuesday morning, sitting in the passenger seat of my own 2005 Buick LeSabre being driven by my own son. The air inside the car was thick with a strange energy, a mixture of my son Kevin's forced cheerfulness and an unspoken tension that made the familiar scent of worn leather and old coffee seem foreign. We were driving through the streets of Charlotte, North Carolina, streets I had known for over 40 years. I knew their cracks and their curves like the lines on my own hand. Yet that morning, everything felt slightly off, as if I was seeing my life through a distorted lens. "You're going to love this new facility, Dad," Kevin said, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "It's state-of-the-art. Dr. Evans came highly recommended. They do a completely comprehensive checkup. Vitals, cognitive tests, physical therapy assessment, the works." Monique thought it was a great idea. Monique. Of course. My daughter-in-law. I nodded slowly, my eyes fixed on the passing scenery. "I feel fine, Kevin. Dr. Peterson has been my doctor for 20 years. He knows my history." "And he's great, Dad, really," Kevin said quickly, a little too quickly. "But this is different. This is about preventative care. Being proactive about your well-being. We just want to make sure you're okay, that's all. We worry about you rattling around in that big house all by yourself." His words were meant to sound caring, but they felt like stones wrapped in silk. Smooth on the outside, heavy and hard underneath. For months, his conversations had been peppered with little comments like that. Hints about the house being too big, about the dangers of an old man living alone. I had always brushed them off. But now, trapped in the car with him, those words seemed to form a pattern, a blueprint for something I couldn't yet see. I thought of my late wife, Clara. She would have seen this coming a mile away. "Be careful, Samuel," she used to tell me, her voice soft but firm as oak. "That woman Monique, she has eyes that are always measuring. She looks at our home, not at our son." At the time, I thought she was being too protective. Now her words echoed in my mind like a prophecy. I tried to push the feeling down. This was my son, my only child. The boy I had taught to ride a bike, to tie his shoes, to be an honest man. I had to trust him. "So what's the name of this doctor again?" I asked, keeping my tone casual. Kevin hesitated for a fraction of a second. "Dr. Evans. Like I said, he's the head of the clinic, and the clinic's name..." He cleared his throat. The Charlotte Wellness Center. It's a new place, very exclusive." He was lying. I could hear it in the slight waver of his voice, see it in the way his eyes darted to the rearview mirror instead of looking at me. A real clinic, a real appointment, he would have known the name without thinking. The dread in my stomach grew colder. That's when I noticed it. We had passed the turnoff for the main medical district 10 minutes ago. We were heading east, deep into the suburbs, into a part of town I rarely visited. Manicured lawns and large impersonal brick buildings replaced the familiar storefronts and oak trees of my neighborhood. "Kevin," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "This isn't the way to any medical center I know." He flinched a small, almost imperceptible jerk of the steering wheel. He forced a laugh. "It's a shortcut, Dad. New route. Avoids all the downtown traffic." "There is no traffic on a Tuesday morning," I stated flatly. The lie was so blatant, so disrespectful of my intelligence that it felt like a slap. My suspicion was no longer a quiet alarm. It was a screaming siren in my head. I sat up straighter, my body tense. I watched every street sign, every landmark, trying to piece together the puzzle of his deception. Why lie? If it was just a checkup, why the secrecy? Why the strange route? My mind raced through the possibilities, each one darker than the last. He and Monique wanted to sell the house. They needed me declared incompetent to do it. This wasn't a checkup, it was an evaluation, an ambush. The car slowed. Kevin signaled to turn right. My heart began to pound against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of betrayal. This was it. The destination. I looked ahead and my blood ran cold. It was not a clinic. It was not a wellness center. It was a sprawling, single-story brick building set far back from the road, surrounded by a perfectly green lawn and a black iron fence. It looked sterile, institutional. And in large, friendly blue letters on a pristine white sign were the words that confirmed my deepest fear: Oak Haven Nursing and Rehabilitation Center. The sight stole the air from my lungs. I felt a profound physical shock, as if the world had tilted on its axis and thrown me into a cold, dark void. I slowly turned my head to look at my son. Kevin stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched, his face a mask of strained indifference. He refused to look at me. He could not face the man he was betraying. "This isn't a clinic, Kevin," I whispered, my voice hoarse. "What is this? What have you done?" He pulled the car into a designated visitor spot, the engine humming softly for a moment before he turned the key. The sudden silence was absolute, broken only by the frantic beating of my own heart. He finally turned to me, but his eyes were empty, devoid of the warmth and love I had known his entire life. They were the eyes of a stranger. His voice was calm, rehearsed, and colder than any winter wind. "It's for your own good, Dad. You can't take care of yourself anymore." The automatic doors of the Oak Haven Nursing Center slid open with a soft, tired hiss. A blast of cold, antiseptic air hit me, a sterile smell that wasn't the smell of clean, but the smell of sickness, of bleach, and of endings. The lobby was a sea of polished linoleum that reflected the pale, humming fluorescent lights from above. It was a place scrubbed clean of all warmth, all personality, all life. The silence was heavy, punctuated only by the quiet drone of the ventilation system and the sharp, lonely click of Kevin's dress shoes on the floor. I moved like a man in a dream, my body walking forward while my mind was still reeling, still stuck on the image of that sign. This wasn't a nightmare. This was real. My son, the boy I had raised, had brought me here to discard me. A woman behind a tall front desk looked up. She wore a practiced professional smile, but her eyes were empty of any genuine warmth. "Can I help you?" "We have an appointment," Kevin said, his voice strained as he tried to maintain a businesslike tone. "For Samuel Jones." The receptionist's fingers clicked across her keyboard. "Ah, yes, Mr. Jones. We've been expecting you." She slid a thick stack of papers across the counter toward Kevin. "If you could please fill these out and sign where indicated." Kevin picked up the pen, and I saw his hand tremble slightly. He kept his eyes fixed on the forms as if they were the only thing in the world that could save him from meeting my gaze. I stood there feeling like a ghost at my own funeral, an unwanted spectator to the meticulously planned disposal of my life. I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip the desk over. I wanted to grab Kevin by the shoulders and shake him back to his senses. But I couldn't. The shock had robbed me of my strength, leaving only a hollow, freezing numbness. Just then, the glass doors hissed open again. It was Monique. She hadn't ridden with us, a deliberate calculation to keep her hands clean of the initial deception. She was dressed in a sharp gray pantsuit, looking every bit the ruthless executive closing a deal. She glanced at me, her expression unclouded by guilt or apology. That measuring look, the one Clara had warned me about, now sized me up as a problem that had finally been solved. She walked directly to me, holding a dark blue duffel bag. "Everything you'll need is in here, Dad," she said, her voice flat and devoid of emotion. She pushed the bag into my hands. It felt unnaturally heavy, weighted with more than just a few sets of pajamas and a toothbrush. It was weighted with the finality of it all. I turned to Kevin, who had just scribbled his last signature. I had to say something. I had to try one last time. "Kevin," I managed my voice a ragged whisper. "Son, look at me. Don't do this." He finally looked up, but his gaze was shifty, landing somewhere over my shoulder. "I'm sorry, Dad. I have an important meeting. I have to go." A meeting. That's what my life was worth to him. An inconvenience to be dealt with before a meeting. The pain in my chest tightened sharp as broken glass. And then he did the cruelest thing of all. The thing I will carry with me to my dying day. Kevin stepped toward me. He didn't hug me. He didn't touch my shoulder. Instead, he reached into the pocket of my coat where I had kept my house keys for 40 years. I felt my son's fingers rummaging in his own father's pocket, an act of intimate, horrific violation. His hand closed around the cold, familiar metal. He pulled them out. The jingle of the keys in the silent lobby sounded as loud as prison chains. The clinking metal seemed to tell the story of a lifetime, the key to the front door through which I had carried Clara over the threshold as a bride, the key to the back door that led to the garden where Kevin had played as a boy, the key to the workshop where I had taught him his first lessons with a hammer. My entire legacy, all my memories rested in his trembling palm, and he was stealing them. He didn't say a word. He simply dropped the keys into his own pocket. Then he and Monique turned their backs on me and walked away. They didn't look back. The automatic doors swallowed them up, releasing them back into the world of the living, leaving me behind. A large, stern-faced orderly approached me. "Mr. Jones, follow me." I followed him down a long, featureless hallway. Every door we passed was identical. The air was thick with the scent of medication and sorrow. Finally, he stopped at a door at the very end of the corridor and pushed it open. "This is your room." I stepped inside. The room was smaller than my garden shed. A single metal frame bed with a thin, pale yellow sheet, a metal locker for a closet, a plastic chair, and one window barred with a perfect view of the parking lot. This was my new world. I placed the duffel bag on the bed. I had no desire to open it. The door clicked shut behind me. I heard the lock turn with a final metallic thud. I was locked in. I shuffled to the window and looked out between the bars. And then I heard it. The unmistakable rumbling sound of my 2005 Buick LeSabre. My car. Kevin was driving my car. I watched it pull out of the parking space, turn onto the access road, and disappear. My life, my freedom was driving away from me. When the sound of the engine faded, all that was left was the silence. A crushing, profound, absolute silence. It pressed in on me, filling my ears, filling my lungs. In that moment, I was no longer Samuel Jones, carpenter, husband, father. I was nothing. A number in a room, a burden that had been successfully offloaded. I had been erased. The darkness in my room at Oak Haven was not like the darkness in my house. The darkness at home was warm and familiar, a comforting old blanket that held the whispers of memory and love. This darkness was cold, empty, and heavy. It pressed down on my chest, making each breath a conscious effort. I lay on the rigid bed, the thin, starchy sheet scratching against my skin like sandpaper, and listened to the symphony of despair. From the room next door came a persistent rattling cough, a dry, painful sound as if someone was trying to expel their very soul. From across the hall, a low, steady moan, the sound of chronic pain that had become as constant as breathing. And then every few minutes came the squeak of a medication cart being pushed down the hall. One of the wheels was bad, creating a rhythmic, high-pitched complaint that repeated itself over and over. Squeak, squeak, squeak. The sound drilled into my skull, a slow torture in the suffocating silence of the night. I closed my eyes, but the image of Kevin's face as he took my keys was seared onto the inside of my eyelids. I could feel the phantom sensation of his fingers in my coat pocket, the cold shock of the metal as he lifted away the legacy of my life. His words echoed in my head. "It's for your own good, Dad. My own good. To be stripped of my home, my freedom, my very identity, and locked away in this concrete box." The pain was a physical thing, a sharp twisting blade in my heart. This was not a cut. This was an amputation. My son had severed me from his life, from the world I had built for him. I held my hands up in front of my face, trying to see them in the dim light that bled in from the hallway. The hands of a carpenter. They were gnarled and calloused, a road map of small silvery scars, each one telling a story. The nick on my thumb from my first chisel at 15. The hardened pads of my palms from thousands of hours spent gripping a hammer, planing wood, turning inanimate lumber into things of use and beauty. These hands had built a home from the ground up. They had held Clara's hand at our wedding. They had cradled Kevin when he was a newborn. They had worked tirelessly to provide, to protect, to build a life. And now they were trembling. An uncontrollable tremor born not of cold, but of sheer crushing powerlessness. The hands that could build anything could do nothing to open the locked door of this room. All they could do was clench into fists, my fingernails digging into the tough skin, a futile attempt to transform emotional agony into a physical sensation I could understand. I felt a hot pressure build behind my eyes, the sting of unshed tears. But I swallowed it down. I would not cry. I would not give them that satisfaction. Even with no one to witness it, I would not completely break. But inside my spirit was fracturing. They had won. Monique with her calculating eyes and Kevin with his weakness that had curdled into cruelty. They had taken everything. I turned to face the wall, feeling small and insignificant. I saw my faint reflection in the dark glass of the window. An old man with silver hair, his face gaunt with shock and grief, his eyes hollow. I didn't recognize him. The man I knew was Samuel Jones, a strong man, a self-sufficient man. The man in the glass was just a shadow, a prisoner. Maybe Kevin was right. Maybe my time was over. It was in that darkest moment, the moment where despair had almost consumed me entirely, that I heard a voice. It didn't come from the hallway. It came from the deepest part of my memory. It was Clara's voice. I remembered a winter afternoon many years ago. A small electrical fire had broken out in my workshop. Nothing major, but it had destroyed a set of custom kitchen cabinets I had spent 2 months building for an important client. The contract was lost. The financial hit was significant. I sat at our kitchen table that evening, my head in my hands, feeling like a complete failure. Clara had come in and placed a hot cup of tea in front of me. She didn't offer empty platitudes like, "Everything will be all right." She simply placed her hand on my shoulder, a touch that was both gentle and strong. I looked up at her. Her eyes were clear and steady. "Samuel," she had said, her voice both soft and resilient as steel. "Look at me. A Jones man does not bow his head. They do not quit when things get hard. They build. They make beautiful things out of broken pieces. And when they have to, they fight. You are a builder, Samuel. You will build it again even better than before." Her words, the memory of her strength, suddenly filled the cold, sterile room. It was like a single match being struck in the vast darkness of my soul. A Jones man does not bow his head. They fight. The trembling in my hands stopped. The pain was still there, sharp as a razor, but it no longer paralyzed me. It began to change, to crystallize into something else, something hard and cold. It was rage, a quiet, focused rage. Grief was a raw piece of timber. Now it was time to shape it, to sharpen it, to turn it into a tool. They thought I was finished. They thought they could lock an old man away and he would simply fade. They had underestimated me. They had forgotten the most fundamental thing about me. A carpenter always measures. He measures twice and cuts once. He studies the material, finds its weaknesses, and plans every single step. Kevin and Monique had made their move. Now it was my turn. The next morning when the orderly brought breakfast, I was a different man. I sat up straight in bed. My eyes were no longer hollow. They were watchful. I ate the bland oatmeal mechanically without complaint, but my mind was a whirlwind of activity. I needed a way out. Not a physical escape. I couldn't climb out the window. I needed a strategic one. I needed a line of communication to the outside world. I needed an ally. I began to study the staff. Most of them were like machines, overworked and indifferent. They moved patients, dispensed pills, and cleaned messes with a detached efficiency. They were walls impenetrable. And then I saw her. A young nurse, probably in her mid-20s. Her name tag read, Brianna Scott. She had a kind, though tired smile and curly hair pulled back in a bun. There was a different quality to her movements. She didn't rush. When she helped an elderly woman eat, she was patient, speaking to her softly, even though the woman was unresponsive. When a confused old man began to shout, she didn't scold him. She placed a calming hand on his arm and spoke to him in low, gentle tones until he settled down. I watched her all day. I memorized her routine. I saw the compassion in her eyes. And I realized she wasn't the weakest link in this system. She was the only human one. Her compassion to them was a liability, but to me it was a doorway. My plan began to form as clear and precise as a blueprint. I didn't have to break down the walls of this prison. I just needed to find the right key, and that key was Brianna Scott. I had to get her alone. Patience is a tool a carpenter learns early. You cannot rush wood. You cannot force a joint that isn't ready. You must wait for the right moment, the right angle, the right pressure. For the rest of that day and all of the next, I became a statue of patience. I sat in my room or in the bleak common area, watching, waiting for my moment. My entire plan hinged on a single variable, the compassion of a young woman I didn't even know. My opportunity came late on my third afternoon in that place. I saw Brianna begin her rounds with the medication cart. The afternoon shift was always the most chaotic, with staff stretched thin and residents growing restless as evening approached. I positioned myself in a chair near the hallway, my heart a slow, heavy drum against my ribs. I watched her move down the hall, her steps efficient but not rushed. She was getting closer. Now, as her cart drew level with my doorway, I let my head fall to my chest and slumped sideways in my chair, letting out a soft groan. It was a performance, but it was fueled by the genuine weakness I felt in my soul. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw her stop. Her routine was broken. "Mr. Jones," I heard her voice laced with concern. "Sir, are you all right?" I felt her hand on my shoulder, a gentle, professional touch. I slowly lifted my head, making sure my eyes looked dazed and unfocused. "Just a little dizzy," I mumbled, my voice raspy. The room started spinning. "Okay, let's just take it easy," she said, her voice calm and reassuring. She knelt beside my chair, checking my pulse. "Your heart rate seems steady. "Have you been drinking enough water?" This was my chance. The hallway was momentarily empty. The other residents were distracted by a television blaring in the common room. I leaned in as if to steady myself and lowered my voice to a desperate whisper, a conspirator's plea. "I'm not sick," I said, my voice urgent and low. "I'm trapped. My son and his wife, they tricked me. They brought me here to get rid of me so they could take my house." Brianna froze. Her fingers were still on my wrist, but her professional composure faltered. I could see a flicker of confusion and alarm in her young eyes. She started to pull back, her instincts telling her to disengage to call a supervisor. I had to hold her attention. "Please," I whispered, looking directly into her eyes, trying to pour every ounce of my sincerity, my desperation into that single look. "They took my phone. I have no way to call for help. I'm not asking you to break me out. I just need to make one phone call. One call to my lawyer. He's my oldest friend. He'll know what to do. Please, just 5 minutes. That's all I ask." The battle that waged within her was plain to see on her face, her brow furrowed with conflict. She was a good person, I could see that, but she was also an employee in a strict, unforgiving system. Helping me was not just against the rules, it could cost her the job she likely needed. She looked down the empty hallway, then back at me. Her mouth opened, probably to give me a rehearsed, non-committal answer to tell me she would speak to the head nurse about my concerns. I couldn't let that happen. That would be the end of it. My file would be marked with a note, "Patient is confused, showing signs of paranoia." They would medicate me into submission. "They think I'm just a confused old man," I said, my voice barely audible but sharp with intent. "That's their whole plan. If you tell someone that's what they'll write down, you are my only chance." I held her gaze, refusing to look away. I had to make her see the truth, the man behind the patient number. Sometimes doing the right thing is more important than doing what you're told. That was the line. It was a gamble, an appeal not to her role as a nurse, but to her character as a human being. I saw it land. I saw the resolve harden in her eyes. The conflict was over. She had made a decision. She glanced quickly over her shoulder one last time. "Okay," she whispered, her voice tight with nerves. "Okay, but we have to be fast." She stood up, her professional mask back in place, but with a new urgency. "Mr. Jones, I'm going to help you to your room so you can lie down. You need to lean on me heavily. Act like you can barely walk." I did as she said, putting my arm around her shoulder and letting my weight sag against her. We began the slow, deliberate walk down the hall. To any casual observer, it looked like a compassionate nurse helping a dizzy patient back to his bed. In reality, it was the first move in a rebellion. When we reached my room, she didn't lead me to the bed. Instead, she guided me past it toward a small door I hadn't paid much attention to, a supply closet. She unlocked it with a key from her belt, and we slipped inside. She closed the door behind us, plunging us into near total darkness, the small space smelling of disinfectant and clean linens. Here she whispered, and I felt the cool, smooth shape of a smartphone being pressed into my trembling hands. The screen lit up, illuminating her worried face. "You have 5 minutes, no more." My fingers, clumsy with adrenaline, fumbled with the screen. I had to take a deep breath to steady them. I knew my lawyer's number by heart. It was a number I hadn't needed to call in years, but one I had never forgotten. I typed the digits, each press of the screen a small victory, a blow against the walls that imprisoned me. The phone rang once, twice. My heart hammered in my chest. What if he didn't answer? What if he was in court? Then a familiar voice, deep and steady, a voice that had been a constant in my life for 40 years. Charles Williams speaking. Tears I didn't know I had been holding back suddenly burned my eyes. Relief washed over me in a powerful, dizzying wave. "Charles," I choked out my voice thick with emotion. "It's me. It's Sam." There was a pause on the other end, then concern. "Sam, you sound terrible. What's wrong? Where are you?" "They put me in a home." "Charles," I said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "Kevin and Monique. They tricked me. They drove me to a place called Oak Haven. They took my keys, Charles. They took my house." I heard a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line, followed by a silence that was more potent than any words. It was the silence of a sharp legal mind processing a great injustice. "The damn fools," Charles finally said, his voice low and dangerous, stripped of its usual courtroom polish. "The absolute greedy fools. They have some kind of medical paper," Charles Thurster continued, my voice gaining strength with every word. "Something they had me sign months ago. They think they have control. Sam, listen to me." Charles said, his voice now crisp and commanding, the voice of the lawyer I needed. Don't sign anything else. Don't talk to them about this. Don't let them bait you into an argument. Just be calm. They want you to act confused. Do not give them the satisfaction. Where are you right now? In a closet, I said. A nurse is helping me. I don't have long. Okay. I'm coming, he said. The decision made instantly. I'll be there first thing in the morning, 9 a.m. sharp. We're going to get you out of there. And then, Sam, we're going to make them pay. Do you hear me? I hear you. I said, a profound sense of hope, the first I'd felt in what seemed like a lifetime surging through me. Thank you, Charles. Don't thank me yet, he said. Just hang on until morning. I ended the call and handed the phone back to Brianna. My hands still shaking, but now with a different energy. It was no longer the tremor of despair, but the vibration of a coming fight. Thank you, I whispered, looking at the young woman who had risked everything for a stranger. She just nodded her eyes wide. Get some rest, Mr. Jones, she said softly. It sounds like you have a big day tomorrow. She slipped out of the closet, leaving me alone for a moment in the darkness before leading me back to my bed. As the door to my room closed, leaving me once again in my solitary confinement, the feeling was entirely different. The room was no longer a tomb. It was a war room. And for the first time in 3 long days, I had hope. The game was not over. It had just begun. The next morning arrived not with a sense of hope, but with a heavy, anxious stillness. I had spent the night staring at the ceiling, my mind a churning sea of plans and fears. Hope was a fragile thing, and I was terrified that something would go wrong, that Charles wouldn't be allowed in, that my brief window of opportunity would be slammed shut. I ate my breakfast in silence, my eyes fixed on the door to my room, waiting. At precisely 9 o'clock, I heard it. A different kind of sound in the hallway. The confident, purposeful footsteps of a man who belonged in a courtroom, not a place like this. A moment later, there was a firm knock on my door. An orderly opened it, and standing there was Charles Williams. It was like seeing a lion walk into a petting zoo. Charles was 74 years old, but he carried himself with the unshakable authority of a man half his age. He wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, a crisp white shirt, and shoes that shone even in the dim, dreary light of the hallway. His presence was so powerful, so out of place in this environment of quiet decay, that the orderly who let him in seemed to shrink in his presence. I'm here to see my client, Mr. Jones. Charles announced, his voice a calm, resonant baritone that commanded respect. He stepped into the room, his sharp eyes taking in every detail in a single sweeping glance, the metal bed, the plastic chair, the barred window. I saw a flash of cold fury in his eyes, the anger of a man witnessing a profound injustice done to his friend. He turned to the orderly. We will require privacy for at least an hour. It was not a request, it was an order. The orderly simply nodded and closed the door behind him. For a moment, we just looked at each other. 40 years of friendship, of shared joys and sorrows passed between us in that silent look. He finally broke the silence. Sam, he said, his voice softer now, filled with a deep personal anger. They will regret this. I will personally see to it that they regret this for the rest of their lives. He placed his leather briefcase on my small table, the solid click of its latches echoing in the room. He didn't sit on the uncomfortable plastic chair. He remained standing, a tower of strength in the middle of my prison cell. All right, let's get to work, he said, his tone shifting back to that of the sharpest lawyer in Charlotte. I spent most of last night reviewing the laws regarding elder care and property. Here's the situation as I see it. The document Kevin had you sign was likely a standard medical power of attorney. Am I correct? I nodded. Yes. He said it was in case I had a fall so he could talk to doctors for me. It seemed sensible at the time. It's a common tactic, Charles said with a grimace. They prey on trust. A medical power of attorney is very specific. It gives him the authority to make healthcare decisions for you if you are deemed incapable of making them yourself. That's it. He used that document likely in conjunction with a fabricated report about your confusion or dizziness to convince the administration here that you required supervised care. It's a gross misuse of the document, but it's a legal gray area they were smart enough to exploit. He began to pace the small room, seeming to shrink around him. However, that document gives him absolutely no authority over your finances, your property, or your legal affairs. None. He cannot touch your bank accounts. He cannot access your investments. And most importantly, he cannot sell your house. Right now, all he has done is warehouse you. The house is still yours 100%. A wave of relief so powerful it almost made me dizzy for real washed over me. So I can just... Leave? Charles stopped pacing and looked at me, his expression serious. Not so fast, Sam. They have the system on their side for the moment. If you try to walk out, they'll call Kevin. Kevin will claim you're having a confused episode, a danger to yourself. The staff here is trained to avoid liability, not to administer justice. They will physically restrain you. It would be your word against your son's, and right now he holds the piece of paper that says he's in charge of your well-being. We can't fight them on their terms. We have to change the terms of the game entirely. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick document bound in a dark blue cover. He laid it on the table. The title was printed in bold, clear letters, Durable Power of Attorney. This, Charles said, tapping the cover, is our first move. This is a comprehensive, durable power of attorney. It covers everything: finances, legal matters, property, and it supersedes any previous limited documents. Most importantly, it names me, Charles Williams, as your sole agent, effective immediately. Once you sign this, that piece of paper Kevin is waving around becomes worthless. I will be the only person legally authorized to speak on your behalf in any matter. If the staff here tries to restrain you, it will be me they have to answer to, not your son. He took a heavy, expensive fountain pen from his coat pocket and uncapped it. This is the first step to taking back your freedom, Sam. I looked at the document, then at the pen. My hands, which had trembled with helpless rage for days, were now perfectly steady. This was something I understood. This was the work of a craftsman. Charles had brought me the right tool for the job. I took the pen from him. It felt heavy and balanced in my hand, a weapon of ink and paper. I leaned over the table, found the signature line, and wrote my name, Samuel Jones. The signature was not the shaky scrawl of an old defeated man. It was the firm, confident script of a man who was signing a declaration of war. I pushed the document back to Charles. He looked at my signature, gave a single satisfied nod, and placed it carefully back in his briefcase. Good, he said. Phase 1 is complete. Now for Phase 2, the strategy. He looked at me, his eyes holding mine. We could sue them. We could drag them into court for elder abuse, for fraud. We would win eventually. But it would take years, Sam. Years of depositions, hearings, emotional turmoil. It would drain your spirit and your bank account. They would paint you as a vindictive old man. It would be a long, ugly war of attrition, and all the while they would be living in your house. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach at the thought. Years of fighting, of seeing them in court. So what do we do? Charles leaned forward, his voice dropping to a low strategic tone. We don't wage a long war. We perform a surgical strike. We do something so swift, so decisive that they won't know what hit them until it's all over. We cut them out of your life completely. We sell the house. The words hit me like a physical blow. Sell the house. My house. The home I built for Clara, the place where every floorboard held a memory, the last piece of her I had left in the world. Sell it, I stammered. Charles, I can't. That's Clara's house. It's all I have. No, Sam. Charles said, his voice firm, but not unkind. Listen to me. Right now, that house is not your home. It's the weapon they are using against you. It's the prize they cheated to win. It's the cage they built for you, even though you're not living in it. As long as you are emotionally tied to that property, they have power over you. A long legal battle for the house would be a battle fought on their terms for their prize. We have to make the house irrelevant. He could see the struggle in my face. Clara's memory isn't in the wood and nails, Sam. It's in here, he said, tapping his chest. She wouldn't want her memory to be a chain that keeps you tied to this misery. She would want you to be free. Selling the house is how you get free. It's fast. It's final. We sell it. We take the primary source of their greed off the table, and we use the funds to set you up for a new life, a life of your own choosing. It's the one move they will never see coming. I looked out the barred window at the dreary parking lot. He was right. Clara's spirit wasn't in the walls. It was in the strength she had instilled in me. To honor her, I had to be strong now. I had to be a builder again. But this time I wouldn't be building with wood. I would be building a new life out of the rubble of the old one. My sentimentality was a luxury I could no longer afford. I turned back to Charles. My heart ached with the pain of letting go, but my mind was clear with the certainty of the decision. This was the only way. Do it, I said, my voice quiet but absolute. Sell it. Sell everything. A slow, grim smile spread across Charles's face. He snapped his briefcase shut. The sound was like the cocking of a gun. They made a critical mistake, Sam, he said as he walked to the door. They thought they were playing checkers with a tired old man. They're about to find out they're playing chess with a master. And they've already lost their queen. He opened the door and was gone. I was alone again, but the room was no longer a prison. It was a command center. The decision had been made. The machine was now in motion. The days that followed Charles's visit were a strange mixture of agonizing slowness and rapid clandestine progress. Inside the walls of Oakhaven, my life was a monotonous routine of bland meals, pointless activities, and the endless ticking of the clock. But outside in the world I had been exiled from, Charles was moving with the speed and precision of a master strategist. He would call me every evening at the same time on a cheap prepaid cell phone he had arranged for Brianna to smuggle to me. Our conversations were brief whispered reports from a war I could not see. It was through these calls that I was forced to watch the desecration of my home, a home I could no longer protect physically, but one I would soon reclaim through a final decisive act. They've moved in completely. Charles told me one evening, his voice tight with controlled anger. My real estate agent, a very sharp woman named Eleanor Vance, did a drive-by this afternoon. She said the front lawn is already a mess. It looks like they dragged furniture across it. I closed my eyes, picturing the perfect green lawn. I had spent countless Saturday mornings mowing the lawn where Clara had planted her rose bushes, and the inside I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Eleanor managed to get a look through the living room window. Charles continued. Monique was in there with a tape measure. She was pointing at the wall between the kitchen and the living room, talking animatedly to Kevin. Eleanor was too far away to hear everything, but she clearly heard the words open concept and needs more light. It seems she's planning a demolition. I felt a white-hot flash of rage, the wall between the kitchen and the living room. I had built that wall with my own 2 hands. I had chosen each piece of timber, fitted each joint with perfect precision. It wasn't just a wall, it was a testament to my craft, and she was going to tear it down with the casual indifference of someone swatting a fly. She's redecorating, I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. Worse, Charles replied. She's erasing. She told Kevin, and a neighbor overheard this part, that they needed to have a big yard sale to get rid of all the old, dusty junk in the house. Clara's rocking chair, the grandfather clock my own father had helped me build, the solid oak dining table where we had shared 40 years of meals. All of it was just old junk to her. It was then that any lingering sentimentality I had for the physical house died. Charles was right. It was no longer a home. It was just a building, a shell they had occupied, and I would burn that shell to the ground, metaphorically speaking, to ensure they were left with nothing but the ashes of their own greed. While they were busy planning their new life, Charles was methodically dismantling it. "I've found our buyer, Sam," he announced 2 days later, a note of triumph in his voice. "It's a perfect scenario. A young doctor and his wife relocating from Baltimore for a job at the main hospital. They have 2 small children. They've been outbid on 3 other houses and they're desperate. Most importantly, they are pre-approved for a mortgage, but they also have enough cash to close immediately if the price is right." "A doctor," I said softly. "A healer." There was a certain poetry in that. A family of healers taking over a place that had been poisoned by greed. "Do they like the house?" "They haven't seen the inside yet," Charles said. "That's the next and most dangerous part of the plan. Eleanor has to get them inside for a viewing tomorrow. Kevin and Monique both work from 9 to 5. Eleanor is going to schedule the viewing for 11 a.m. It gives her a wide window. The next 24 hours were the longest of my life. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I just sat by my window staring at the parking lot, my mind 1,000 miles away inside my own home, praying that this delicate, dangerous maneuver would succeed. Charles called me the next afternoon, right on schedule. "The Eagle has landed," he said, and I could hear the relief in his voice. "It was closer than we would have liked, but it's done." He recounted the story Eleanor had told him. She had used a spare key I had given Charles years ago to let herself and the young couple into the house. They were immediately impressed. The doctor's wife, a woman named Sarah, apparently ran her hand over the hand-carved mantelpiece above the fireplace. "You can feel the history here," she had said. "Someone built this place with love." I felt a lump form in my throat. She understood. In 10 minutes, this stranger had understood more about my home than Monique had in 10 years. The tension came when they were upstairs. Eleanor heard a car pull into the driveway. Her heart, she told Charles, nearly stopped. She herded the couple into a back bedroom and peeked through the blinds. It was a delivery truck dropping off a package for a neighbor. A false alarm, but it was a stark reminder of the razor's edge they were walking on. The close call was enough to seal the deal. The couple didn't want to risk losing another house. Before they even left the driveway, they told Eleanor they wanted it. They made a full-price offer, all cash, with a request to close in 72 hours. "I accepted on your behalf," Sam Charles told me over the phone. "The offer was transmitted electronically. The buyers have already signed. I have the documents here. All they need is your signature." "And how do we manage that?" I asked. "Leave it to me," he said. The next day, Charles arrived again, but this time he wasn't alone. He was accompanied by a woman he introduced as a mobile notary public. To the staff, he was simply a lawyer visiting his client to sign some routine legal papers. The notary was his paralegal. We sat in my small room, the three of us, and spread the closing documents out on my bed. I looked at the papers, at the legal language that officially transferred ownership of my life's work to a family of strangers. There was a moment of profound sadness, a final farewell to the life I had shared with Clara. But as I picked up the pen, Charles offered me that sadness was replaced by a cold, clear sense of purpose. I was not losing a house. I was reclaiming a life. I signed my name on each page, my hand as steady as it had ever been holding a hammer. The notary stamped each signature with her official seal. The sound was like a judge's gavel delivering a final verdict. Charles gathered the papers, his face grim but satisfied. "It's done," he said. "The money will be transferred to a new account under my control by tomorrow afternoon. The deed will be filed with the county clerk. As of tomorrow, that house will no longer belong to you. It will belong to the Miller family." He stood to leave, then paused at the door. "They're having a housewarming party on Saturday," he said, a predatory glint in his eye. "A neighbor I spoke with saw the invitation. It seems they want to show off their new prize to all their friends." I looked at him, and I understood. The trap was not just set. The bait was now taken. All that was left was for the jaws to spring shut. "I imagine," I said slowly, "that they will be very surprised to learn who the guests of honor really are." Charles allowed himself a rare, wolfish grin. "Oh, I think surprise is an understatement, Sam. A profound understatement." For 2 weeks, I existed in a state of suspended animation. I followed the lifeless routine of Oak Haven, but I was not truly there. My mind was in a constant low hum of anticipation. I was a coiled spring, a drawn bowstring waiting for the moment of release. Charles had told me the date of the party, a Saturday, and as the day approached, the air in my small room felt thick with a strange electric energy. I knew that miles away in the home I had built, the final act of my son's betrayal was about to play out, and it would also be the stage for his undoing. I did not have to imagine the scene. Charles, leaving nothing to chance, had arranged for it to be described to me in perfect, agonizing detail. He had hired a private investigator, a discreet woman who posed as a member of the catering staff to observe the entire event. The report she gave Charles, which he then relayed to me in a hushed phone call Sunday morning, painted a picture so vivid it felt like I was watching it all unfold from a dark corner of my own living room. The party began just after sunset. The house, my house, was blazing with lights, more lights than I had ever turned on at once. Loud thumping music, a style I didn't recognize, spilled out onto the lawn, a jarring sound that had no place within those quiet, sturdy walls. Dozens of expensive cars lined the street, a testament to the life of superficial success Kevin and Monique had so desperately craved. According to the investigator's report, Monique was the undisputed queen of the evening. She wore a tight, shimmering silver dress that seemed out of place against the warm tones of the oak floors and handcrafted woodwork. She moved through the crowd with a triumphant air, a glass of champagne permanently in her hand, accepting compliments and basking in the envy of her friends. She was, the investigator noted, giving tours. She would lead groups of guests through the rooms, her voice loud and authoritative as she laid out her grand vision for the house's transformation. "This whole wall is coming down." Of course, she announced in the living room, gesturing toward the load-bearing wall I had spent a week framing and securing. I envision a completely open concept living space. Clean lines, very minimalist. The previous owner's taste was a bit cluttered. My life's work, my carefully chosen details, the very soul I had poured into that home, was dismissed as clutter. The investigator described how Monique would run her hand over the smooth, hand-planed surfaces of the built-in bookshelves, not with admiration, but with disdain. "All this dark wood has to go," she was heard saying to a friend. "It's so dated. We're thinking of painting everything white, a blank canvas." She wanted to erase me to paint over my legacy with a coat of sterile, fashionable white. And Kevin was a shadow at his own celebration. He stood beside Monique, a fixed, glassy smile on his face. He wore a suit that seemed a size too tight, as if he were an actor in a costume he found deeply uncomfortable. While Monique held court, he refilled drinks and nodded along to her pronouncements, his eyes constantly darting around the room, never settling, never looking truly at ease. He was a man haunted by his own victory. The investigator reported one particularly telling exchange. An older colleague of Kevin's had clapped him on the back and asked, "So where's your father, Kevin? I'd love to congratulate him on such a beautiful home." Kevin's smile faltered for a moment. He cleared his throat and mumbled something about me needing specialized care and being much more comfortable in a new state-of-the-art facility. He made my imprisonment sound like a luxurious retirement, a final gift from a loving son. The lie was so smooth, so practiced, that it made the bile rise in my throat even just hearing it secondhand. The peak of their hubris, the absolute summit of their arrogance, came around 10 o'clock. Monique clinked a knife against her champagne flute, calling the chattering crowd to attention. The music softened. All eyes turned to her as she stood in the center of the living room, a radiant, conquering smile on her face. Kevin moved to stand beside her, a puppet taking his place next to the puppeteer. "Thank you all so much for coming," Monique began, her voice ringing with false sincerity. "Kevin and I are just so thrilled to finally be in a home that reflects us. It's been a long journey, but as you can see, it was worth every bit of the effort." She paused, letting the crowd murmur their approval. "This house represents a new beginning for us," she continued, raising her glass. "A fresh start. It's a place where we can build our future, entertain our friends, and finally live the life we've always dreamed of." She then turned and beamed at Kevin, who dutifully raised his own glass. She held her flute high in the air, the crystal sparkling under the lights. "So I'd like to propose a toast," she declared, her voice reaching a crescendo. "To ambition, to getting what you want, and to our new beginning. To our new home." The crowd erupted in cheers. "To your new home." They echoed, their voices filling the rooms, the sound bouncing off the walls I had built. As they drank their champagne, celebrating a theft, reveling in a lie, they were completely oblivious. They were toasting a ghost ship, a beautiful facade that was already legally sold, already signed away. They were celebrating a future that had already been canceled. And as I sat in the dark of my room at Oak Haven, listening to Charles recount this final act of their arrogance, I felt no pain. Only a profound, ice-cold calm. The carpenter had measured. The pieces were in place. It was time to make the final cut. While I sat in the quiet of my new small apartment, the story of that night was recounted to me by Charles. He described the scene with the meticulous detail of a lawyer presenting his closing argument, painting a picture so clear that I could almost hear the champagne glasses clinking and feel the foundations of my old house shudder as justice arrived. According to Charles, the party was at its peak, a loud, self-congratulatory affair when the doorbell rang. The sound, a simple, clear chime, cut through the music and laughter. For a moment, no one moved. It was the unexpected note in their perfect symphony of success. Kevin, playing the part of the gracious host, laughed and started for the door. "Must be the latecomers hoping there's still champagne left," he announced to the room. He pulled the door open, a wide, welcoming smile plastered on his face. And then the smile did not just fade, it shattered. It collapsed into a mask of pure, uncomprehending shock. Standing on the porch I had built was not a tardy guest. It was Charles Williams, looking immaculate and imposing in a dark suit. Beside him stood a young couple, the Millers looking nervous but resolute. And standing just behind them, silent and official in their uniforms, were 2 police officers. Kevin just stared, his mouth slightly agape, the color draining from his face. The music and laughter from inside seemed to fade into a distant hum. Charles was the first to speak. His voice was not loud, but it carried with the weight of absolute authority cutting through the festive atmosphere. "Good evening, Kevin," he said calmly. "I believe there has been a misunderstanding. This is not your house." The words hung in the air, simple, direct, and utterly devastating. From inside, Monique, sensing a problem, began to walk toward the door. "Kevin, honey, who is it?" she called out, her voice still bright with feigned cheer. She appeared behind Kevin, and her smile vanished the instant she saw the group on the porch. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded, her eyes narrowing at Charles. "This is a private party." "It is indeed a private party," Charles agreed smoothly. "But you are holding it in the wrong house." He held up a file folder. "In my hand, I have the legally executed and filed deed of sale for this property signed by the legal owner, Samuel Jones. The property was sold 10 days ago to my clients here, Dr. and Mrs. Miller." The young couple, Dr. Miller and his wife Sarah, gave a slight, awkward nod. They looked deeply uncomfortable, innocent bystanders in a drama they never wished to join. Monique let out a sharp, disbelieving laugh. "That's absurd. This is our house. Samuel he is unwell. He couldn't possibly have signed anything." "On the contrary," Charles said, his voice like ice. "Mr. Jones is of perfectly sound mind, a fact which has been certified by a court-appointed psychiatrist. He has also signed a durable power of attorney naming me as his legal agent. Every action taken has been perfectly legal and is now a matter of public record." He opened the folder, showing them the top page with its official seals and my steady, defiant signature. It was then that one of the police officers stepped forward slightly. His voice was calm and professional, which made his words all the more terrifying. "Sir, ma'am," he said, addressing Kevin and Monique, "we are here to prevent a breach of the peace. This is a civil matter, but as of the filing of this deed, you are on this property without the consent of the new legal owners. That makes you trespassers." Monique's face turned from pale to a deep, blotchy red. "Trespassers. This is our home. You can't just throw us out." The officer did not flinch. "Ma'am, our instructions are clear. The new owners wish to take possession of their property tonight. You and Mr. Jones will be given 30 minutes to gather your personal belongings and vacate the premises. If you refuse, we will be forced to arrest you for trespassing." The finality of it, the cold, inescapable logic of the law, finally broke through Monique's arrogant denial. Her face crumpled. Panic, pure and ugly, flashed in her eyes. All the while, Kevin stood beside her, utterly silent, his head bowed in shame. He was a statue of humiliation. By now, the music inside had died completely. The guests, drawn by the confrontation, had gathered in the foyer. A wave of whispers spread through the crowd. People began backing away, their faces a mixture of shock, pity, and morbid curiosity. The entire foundation of Kevin and Monique's carefully constructed life was dissolving in front of a live audience of their friends and colleagues. But as their world was collapsing in on itself, mine was finally beginning. The scene Charles described to me was not one I needed to witness, because at that exact moment, I was sitting in a quiet, warmly lit cafe downtown. The air smelled of coffee and cinnamon. Across the table, Charles sat with me, the real Charles, not the specter of vengeance at the door, but my friend. Between us on the table were the final papers, not for a sale, but for a creation. I was signing the documents to officially establish the Clara Jones Craftsmanship Scholarship Fund, an endowment to support young students in the vocational arts. The kind of kids who, like me, preferred to build things with their hands. All the money from the sale of the house, every last penny, was going into this fund. Charles watched me sign the last page. He looked at the document, then at me. "Are you sure, Sam?" he asked gently. "You've been through hell. You don't want to keep just a little for yourself. A new car. A trip." I put the pen down and looked out the cafe window at the city lights. I had a small, clean apartment. I had my workshop in the spare bedroom. I had my freedom. For the first time in years, I felt a genuine, unburdened smile spread across my face. "Charles," I said, turning back to him, "I have never felt richer in my entire life." The final image Charles left me with was of the scene on the street outside my old house. The party guests had all scattered, melting away into the night, not wanting to be associated with the spectacular downfall. Under the cold, judgmental glow of the streetlights, Kevin and Monique were carrying cardboard boxes filled with their clothes and possessions out to their car. They moved in a deafening silence, surrounded by the quiet, watching eyes of the neighbors. They had gambled everything for a house, for a lifestyle, and in the end, they had lost it all. True wealth is never measured by the property you own, but by the integrity you keep. Betrayal may build temporary walls, but dignity builds an everlasting legacy. The strongest foundations are not made of stone or wood, but of character, respect, and the love you leave behind.